Hey, everybody, welcome to the Porn Free Millennial Podcast. I'm your host, Mac, and today is episode 64 of the Porn Free Millennial Podcast. And I'm going to be going over a reflection that I wrote back in December of 2025 called The Girl Down the Street. This podcast is really going to focus in on, I think, how porn finds young men and young women at an early age, typically before they have their first boyfriend or girlfriend, which I will be talking about my personal story with that, how I had a relationship with porn before I even had my first girlfriend, and I think how that affected me and affected her. So that's going to be the reflection. I'm going to be working to do more of these, I think, when I do solo podcasts, is reviewing some of the material that I've written. So definitely check out Substack. It's a great social media platform. That's where it's kind of like my home base. It's where I write. I write reflections. I have a weekly newsletter. And I also do poetry and like to collaborate with a lot of creators on there. A lot of the people I've had on the podcast are from Substack. So it's a great place to go. Porn Free Millennial, subscribe there. And then also, just wanted to shout out Ever Accountable. So I've been working with them for 2 years. They're an accountability software company. I've interviewed their CEO, Tyler Patterson, twice. So I'll put those episodes in the description. And really love the company, love working with them. The accountability software works. And I do have a 14-day free trial and then 20% off either a month or a year when you sign up using my affiliate link. But yeah, try it out. Great company. They'll give you your money back too if it doesn't work for you. But I found that it just adds that additional friction that's needed, especially when you're having your off days. And then also there's that rocket fuel because it links you up with an accountability partner. So they're basically tagged, whenever you might be looking at something that is, I would say, triggering, right? That might be getting you back on that relapse cycle. And along with that, it has other capabilities too, that it uses AI to scan the screen. If there's anything showing up, it's going to let you know, let your accountability partner know, even kick you off that page that you're on, which is great. And then I also am working with this company called Ritual Organics. So they do an organic tallow-based sunscreen skincare product, which is great that I've used. I've been using that now for let's see, a little over a year, I would say. And it's good stuff, organic. It uses 4 organic oils along with non-nano zinc and organic grass-fed tallow. So if you use my link there and you purchase the product, they do have a 15% off there for Ritual Organics. So just wanted to give a shout out to them, to my affiliate partners. Great products. Try them out. So with that being said, the girl down the street. So before I read the article, I was looking at this 2024 Missouri Medicine study called Effects of Pornography on Youth, a review. So I just wanted to give you a few things that I just took away that I think will help lend to, I think, just understanding this perspective that I'm working to share. So, a recent medical review says back in 2024, published in Missouri Medicine, examined the growing effects pornography is having on children and adolescents in the internet age. The study found that boys are often first exposed to pornography around the ages of 10 to 11, while girls are typically exposed around ages 12 to 13. So, think about that for a moment, right? That's so young. And when you think about the word exposed, right? And I've heard this, I think, colloquially. I think, there probably are some studies that talk about this, but it's typically not like they're going out and seeking it. It's like in my experience, when I was 10, it was a friend showed me. That's typically, I think, a lot of people's stories when it comes to porn. Normally, it's somebody showing them it. It could be in this day and age, right? If you're just on a social media site, there just might be something that pops up. So the word exposed, I think, is a really important word. Exposed, right? It's typically like, hey, I'm not seeking it out because you don't really know what it is. So normally it's something that comes into your life where you're not really asking for it, or you might be curious about it, but you don't really know what it is. So I just thought the word exposed, I just want to call that out because I think that's a really important word. But yeah, just think about that for a moment, right? Ages 10 to 11 for boys, 12 to 13 for girls. So that's elementary school. You're heading into middle school. And think about where the childhood adolescent brain is at that time, right? They don't They don't. I mean, I didn't understand intimacy, relations, love, or think about it too around that age. I mean, that's when puberty's starting to kick in, or even pre-pubescent, right? Like you're just starting to feel comfortable with your body, and then it starts changing. So just think about that time period of being first exposed to porn. Just put yourself there. If you're obviously if you're listening, you've been exposed to porn. I mean, think about it statistically. I mean, pretty much everyone has at some point in their life. And you're not even at that stage really where your brain's developed and you're exposed to this stuff. So the researchers explain that pornography is now accessible through smartphones, right? Streaming services, social media forums, adult websites, and internet connected devices. In their words, it is available almost everywhere, and I would agree with that. So there's three A's, which I've talked about before, but there's three things that have fueled this explosion, right? So affordability, so it's free. Accessibility, you can access it on your not just your laptops, computers, right, but on your smartphones, or you're watching TV, smart TVs, all that. And then anonymity. So you can do it in secret and private. I know those sites are still looking at your data and all that stuff, your information on the back end. But I think to us, right, there's that anonymity to where you don't have to go to a store to go purchase a magazine. You don't have to go to one of those theaters like they did back in the day. You can literally just open up your phone and it'll take you just a matter of seconds and you'll be exposed to countless, endless pornography, right? And there's this one statistic that stuck with me that was pretty crazy. So, 28,000 people, I think this was 2024, 28,000 people visit porn sites every single second. Okay, how many seconds have passed by, right? And just do the math there. And then another one, right? Pornhub alone received over 2.14 billion visits in a single month. So that's more than Instagram, Netflix, Pinterest, and TikTok combined. So think about that. All those major social media platforms and like Netflix, all of that, all of those combined, that adds up to how many visits Pornhub receives in a single month. And that's just one porn site. That's probably the biggest one. But just think about that traffic, right? And just think about how many young kids that aren't even, they're still minors. They're not even adults yet legally are looking at porn. And the study also found that by the age of 16, around 70% of boys were watching pornography 4 to 5 times a week. And the researchers linked repeat exposure to things like more permissive attitudes towards sex, stronger gender stereotypes, which I would say the gender stereotypes portrayed in porn, right, are oftentimes, I think, caricatures. They're not really true representations of like what being a man, what being a woman looks like in those situations. Earlier sexual behavior, greater isolation. I think that's a huge one. And distorted relationship expectations, big time. And I think when you really sit with these findings, it changes the way you think about modern relationships, right? Because it's not just shaping our private behavior, but more it's shaping our emotional development, expectations, right, for the other sex and ourselves. And it's shaping how young men and women learn to view themselves and each other before they even know who they are, right? You, such an intimate act as sexuality, right? A sacred act. And we're learning about it there first, typically, most of the time. And I just think, there's something deeper to think about. And this is what I'm going to talk about on my article or in my article that I'm going to read. But it's just I think it has a really huge effect on innocence. It really, I think, takes away innocence. It violates innocence of the young. And I think there's something beautiful, right, about the innocence of a young boy or a young girl and that wonder that you have in the world. And just being outside, being with friends, starting to see things in a different light as you're getting older, as your body's developing. It's a beautiful thing. But then you have porn in the background, right? And how addictive it is. And just as a young kid, I think it really starts to morph and affect your view of the world. And not like you still can't have a great childhood and I surely did had a good childhood, but there's something in the background there. There's something attached to you that's, I think, a vampiric type of entity that's sucking away that innocence, right? That we see the world in. And it's not just the innocence of the young boy exposed too early, but I think it's the innocence of the people who that he will someday attempt to love while carrying a battle he does not yet understand. And that's my story. So yeah, this is going to be a personal reflection because I was one of those boys, and it's not really as much of a story about addiction, uh, but I think it's more about people standing nearby who quietly absorb that fallout without ever understanding why, like the girlfriend that I had at an early age. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. So this is The Girl Down the Street, a reflection on innocence and the wounds we never saw coming. So, this reflection is dedicated to that girl down the street, my first love. My first kiss happened at the bus stop just around the corner of my childhood home with a girl who lived just down the street, a house I still drive by anytime I'm visiting my parents. The house itself holds mixed emotions when I see it. I remember the burning flame of a first love, being absolutely obsessed with my crush, hoping she'd notice me on my bike or playing basketball in my buddy's front yards. My front yard, too. If she ever came across the street and I was playing basketball, I definitely would try to show off and do something crazy, right? So I remember walking straighter, puffing my chest out anytime I sensed her presence, my hidden palms gathering sweat with the nervous anticipation of her attention and approval. In eighth grade, I finally had my shot and won her affection with a memorable peck before walking home. After that, we became official and I was on cloud nine. I remember that was a really exciting time because I was like, yes, we're dating. Remembering this milestone also reminds me of how incapable I was of handling such a gift with care and how easily immaturity and a complete lack of awareness can squander something precious. While I was dating this girl, I had a full-blown porn addiction, and it quietly sabotaged my ability to love her the way she deserved. I remember being quick with physical affection, but embarrassingly slow. I would say a snail's pace would be charitable with my emotional understanding or attention. I remember the breakup being mainly out of boredom and her upcoming birthday. I had no idea what to get her, and the stress of such a task was too much to bear. At that point, it made sense, at least in my over sexualized mind, to go back to what I knew and what I was comfortable with, being alone in the dark with that familiar search and that familiar screen. I remember her being confused and hurt, and me not feeling much at all. Such a sad memory looking back, because she was quite the catch, and it was a dream come true for me. It's amazing the power that addiction can have so early in one's life. Fast forward to senior year and I had my second chance. Even though I broke up with her back in middle school, I still had the same feelings. Feelings that grew over time and in the background of her long relationship with another guy. I was confident that if she ever broke up with him, we'd have our chance again. And we did. I'd grown into a muscular athlete, a budding writer, a team captain of the basketball team, and a popular influence. I had a lot going for me, but at an even greater pace, the porn addiction grew with me. The dopamine rush of winning the girl, unfortunately, did not supersede the familiar ritual, the gift of her affection. And over the course of a few months, it began to wane and wither. This time she broke up with me, mainly because I was overbearing and jealous. Looking back, I think my love for her at this time was a lot more of an object more than a person, something I firmly believe was rooted in my relationship with porn. I remember her spending time with a good friend on a Friday night, and me, for some reason, thinking she was lying to me. Yeah, thinking she was with some other guy or something, right? If only I could hear my past self on the phone now. What an insolent child I was. Oh my gosh, cringeworthy. I blew up in jealous anger and she broke it off, likely stunned by my emotional outburst. Even now, still a single, like, there's a small tingle of shame, I think, whenever I think about it, right? She didn't deserve that, and many after her didn't. This wasn't the last time the same pattern surfaced. The immaturity and lack of emotional intelligence clung close as I aged. It showed up in college, showed up in my 5 year marriage, kept showing up until finally I had the courage to trace it back to its roots. And that's really why I'm sharing this today with you all. it's been on my mind since writing my last newsletter. The word innocence, right? And I talked about that at the beginning of the podcast. This word innocence really matters. And I think about it a lot. It makes me think about, I have nephews, I have a niece, I've got some good buddies that are now having kids. And that innocence that you see in a child is a beautiful thing. And I think we still have it, as adults, that innocence, but it is attacked and we need to protect it. So innocence really, especially for our youth, right? This memory brings up to mind not only my innocence being torn away through my relationship with porn, but also the innocence of that girl down the street, the girl so many men fail to think about. I don't just have deep empathy for that young boy who got hooked on porn at the age of 10. I feel just as much for that young girl who would only one day, who would one day become his first girlfriend, completely unaware of the relationship happening behind the scenes. When you really sit with that, it explains a lot, not just about addiction, but about the quiet heartbreak that shapes people long before they ever have the words for it. I think about a lot of women who grew up thinking that they failed, that they weren't enough, that their middle school or high school boyfriend's distance meant something about them, that emotional gap was their fault. Meanwhile, this boy was in a war he never chose, against an enemy he never understood, with weapons no 10-year-old should ever need. And I think even at older ages, this argument still stands. That's when the disenchantment starts, not in adulthood, not after a string of bad relationships. I think it starts in childhood, an innocence poisoned early, and expectations warped before either one knows what love is supposed to look like. So, yes, I do have empathy for that boy who got trapped, but I also have empathy for the girl who felt the terrible effects of a battle she never saw. Two kids, one wounded in silence and shame, one wounded by fallout and blame. Both youthful shoulders sagging underneath a struggle they never deserved. This is what I think about when I drive by her parents' house. That's what I still think about when I think about her today. I'm hoping she has a great life and the love she always deserved. I know she's married now and has kids, and that brings me a quiet sense of resolution. And if I ever do see her and talk to her, I'd want her to know that she did nothing wrong, that the distance, the confusion, the immaturity were never reflections of her worth, but signs of an internal division I was fighting long before I had words for it. With everything I carried, the porn, the wounds, the early manipulation, I'd still want her to know that I am sorry. So that's the piece there. That's the girl down the street. And yeah, it was emotional writing this. I think it was just something that I was thinking about for a while, right? Of, this first relationship I had in my life, this girl that I really was, head over heels for. But I think it turned in this obsession, right? Because I think with this porn mind, this over sexual mind developed so early at such a young age, I think it was just confusing for me. But in a way too, I kind of thought, hey, this is kind of how everyone is because everyone's looking at porn at this age. All my friends are, whatnot. And in some ways, it becomes normalized, and that's just how you think. That's how relationships are supposed to be, or how you're supposed to see somebody. And it really took me, I mean, really until about 8 years ago when I started recovery and started the process. It was a big unwinding, I think, of that, and unpacking all of that and unpacking uh, these thoughts that I had and what I thought was normal. Coming to realize like it's not. It's warped. It's I'd say a virus that starts eating away, I think, at humanity, not just within yourself, but how you're treating other people, how you see other people. And like I was talking about that study earlier, it's just such a high percentage, I think, of young people are exposed at such an early age. So I think it's just a really important thing to think about. I think it's an important thing to think about if you're a parent and you're raising kids, to take it seriously and to have good emotion or good empathetic talks with them and to be in their corner and to not not shame them so much, but to be there. Because I think a lot of times with porn, it's an isolating thing, and the more shame you feel, I think the more isolated you get. It kind of feeds it. And I think with my parents, I just never really had too much talks with it, really. So it wasn't much like they shamed me about it. Uh, but in the same way, I think it could have been helpful for me. I think just to have more of guidance there, and I think developed some tools early on how to be aware of it and aware of what it can do to you, and also have just tools. I think in guidance and mentorship on, hey, like what are some healthy alternatives that I can do, or what are some things I can do to start rewiring my mind that way, and that came down the road later, right, in my life towards the end of my 20s. I'm 34 now. And some of that stuff you won't really understand, I think, until you're a little bit older, right? I think for men, I think it's typically around the age of 25 where the brain fully develops. Might not even seem that way, I think, for some men, right? There's still times where I'm like, is my brain fully developed to some of these decisions I make? But I think over time you get more mature, but I also think that there's no excuse, I think, for not having those conversations early on and having safeguards, right? I think while I was talking about ever accountable, I mean, it's not just for adults. I think you can use that as well if you have kids in the home with monitoring their devices, because it's just everywhere and it's so easy to find. But yeah, just think about that, right? And think about it too, where, there's a growing, I think, usage with women too at a young age, and how that might warp their view of men. And I think what we see now in culture, at least in the US, right, there's just it's like this war between men and women. And I just think that when we start off that way, with porn at such an early age, it doesn't quite surprise me that, there's this disconnect, or there's, less people are dating, less people are getting married or having kids. I think that porn has a part to play in that for sure. That's just, my opinion on it, because I think it just sets up those expectations so poorly, and in such a, I think, in a way that is not healthy. And it's so focused on sexualization, objectification, and not like growing as people, and, seeing the good in people, and seeing the humanity in people, right? Instead, it's just looking at people like objects. So yeah, hopefully that was a helpful reflection for you, the girl down the street. I will go ahead and put the link to that, the link to the study, the link to those podcast episodes I talked about with Tyler Patterson in here. Also, if you're still listening too, I do provide one-on-one coaching as well. So if you're interested in that, you can book a free 30-minute consultation with me. Just send me an email at pornfreemillennialcoaching@gmail.com. I'll also put a link to, for, if you wanted to book a call, I've got a link to Calendly, which basically syncs up with my calendar. So if you wanted to book some time to talk, feel free to do so. Or if you have a story, or if you've been working on helping people out with pornography, want to hop on my podcast, let me know. Definitely open to collaboration. So, with all that being said, everybody, keep fighting the good fight. Much love, and we will talk to you later.